Rico, played by Cameron Giles, functions as the destabilizing force in Paid in Full, a character whose ambition, volatility, and hunger for recognition gradually corrupt an already fragile criminal ecosystem. His introduction establishes him as an outsider entering a structured operation. While Ace and Mitch move with discipline and discretion, Rico inserts himself with loud confidence, reckless aggression, and an eagerness to prove he belongs at the highest level immediately. This personality shift becomes a central narrative conflict. Every scene with Rico subtly pushes the organization closer to unnecessary exposure. When he boasts in public, interrogates associates with theatrical intensity, or flaunts money carelessly, the film uses these behaviors to show how ego can destroy systems built on secrecy. The turning point occurs when Rico's impatience collides with Mitch's loyalty-first approach. Mitch values stability and trust. Rico values speed and control. The robbery sequence demonstrates this contrast. Rico's explosive reaction during the interrogation of an enemy dealer shows his core flaw. He confuses violence with authority. Instead of extracting information with strategy, he relies on intimidation, escalating the situation beyond what the moment requires. This recklessness sets the stage for the film's most devastating event, Rico's betrayal of Mitch. In the climactic scene, his decision to murder Mitch to steal his cocaine supply reveals that loyalty, friendship, and history mean nothing compared to his desire to dominate. Rico's final scenes deepen the realism. When arrested, he immediately chooses cooperation with law enforcement, offering to expose drug networks in Washington, D.C. to avoid a long-term sentence. This matches the real-world behavior of the man the character is based on, Alberto Alpo Martinez, a notorious Harlem dealer who became one of the most infamous informants in street history after confessing to multiple murders, including the killing of his partner Rich Porter. An often overlooked consequence of Rico's portrayal occurred years after the film's release. In 2005, Cameron was shot in both arms while stopped at a traffic light in Washington, D.C. Although initially reported as a carjacking attempt, producer Dame Dash later stated that the attack was direct retaliation for Cameron playing Rico with such authenticity. This real-world consequence reinforces how closely the character mirrored the streets that inspired him, making Rico one of cinema's most dangerous blends of fiction and lived reality. Tommy Gibbs' rise in Black Caesar is structured as a complete criminal life cycle. Every phase illustrates how trauma, ambition, and proximity to power shape a man into Harlem's self-appointed emperor. His story begins with a formative act of violence. As a shoeshine boy, he is brutally beaten by a corrupt white cop named McKinney, an attack that fractures his worldview and cements his belief that survival depends on becoming more ruthless than the forces that control his community. The film uses this moment to establish Tommy's driving logic. Legitimacy is impossible, so dominance must be earned through force. As he ages into adulthood, the film shows him strategically targeting the Italian mafia's infrastructure, removing mid-level players one by one, then using extortion, bribery, and targeted executions to install himself within their hierarchy. Once Tommy controls Harlem's rackets, the narrative highlights how his methods change. Instead of acting like a street-level enforcer, he starts running the neighborhood like a corporate state. He eliminates competing dealers, centralizes protection payments, and implements a warped version of economic stability for the people living under his rule. One of the film's most striking sequences involves Tommy purchasing a luxury apartment in the same all-white high-rise where his mother once worked as a maid. By handing her the keys, he symbolically flips the racial power dynamic that shaped his childhood, showing how he interprets success as revenge delivered through material elevation. His brutality escalates alongside his ego. He betrays allies, destroys relationships, and even assaults his long-term partner, Helen. These choices reveal how absolute power magnifies the darkest traits already inside him. The film's final moments bring his arc full circle. After surviving assassination attempts and losing control of his empire, he wanders back to his childhood neighborhood, only to be swarmed by a gang of young kids who beat him down in the same alley where he was once victimized. Many viewers interpret this ending as either literal or symbolic. Either way, it reinforces the film's central idea that no gangster, no matter how feared, escapes the past that forged him. Quick's role in Harlem Nights is constructed as a study in survival, loyalty, and fast thinking under pressure, all filtered through the elegance and danger of 1930s Harlem nightlife. As Sugar Ray's adopted son and heir, Quick is positioned early as both the brains and the reflexes behind the Club Sugar Ray operation. The film establishes his instincts in the opening sequence, where he kills an armed gambler in self-defense. The moment is framed not as impulsive violence, but as the logical calculation of someone raised to react faster than the threats around him. This pattern continues throughout the story. Every major obstacle is met with Quick's mix of improvisation, suspicion, and disarming charm. The club's turf war with local mobsters and corrupt police forces defines his strategic role. When Bugsy Calhoun targets the club for extortion, Quick's approach shifts from reactive to preemptive. He engineers misdirection schemes, analyzes every angle of exposure, and screens associates based on reliability rather than emotion. A clear example occurs in the diner shooting sequence, where Quick notices a setup unfolding and eliminates the assassin before she can draw her weapon. The film plays the moment for style, but narratively it demonstrates that Quick's greatest strength is his ability to detect danger one step before it becomes inescapable. Quick's relationship with Sugar Ray also shapes his trajectory. Unlike many cinematic gangsters who rise by betraying their mentors, Quick operates as an extension of Sugar Ray's philosophy: keep power in the community, stay independent from white-run criminal systems, and build a future untouched by outside control. Their dynamic is evident during the final heist against Calhoun, where Quick executes the plan with the precision of someone who has absorbed Sugar Ray's entire methodology. The operation succeeds because Quick treats every detail as life or death, from timing the safe-cracking sequence to disguising their escape through overlapping decoys. Eddie Murphy later admitted he threw the script together faster than he should have, yet Quick remains one of his most controlled performances. His calm demeanor, sharp dress, and surgical decision-making give the impression of a man who has already calculated the cost of every move long before anyone else at the table realizes there is a game being played. Birdie operates as the psychological center of Above the Rim, functioning less as a traditional gangster and more as a predatory strategist who understands exactly how to identify and manipulate emotional vulnerabilities. His introduction establishes this immediately. He moves through Harlem with a calm, watchful authority that contrasts sharply with the explosive style of other cinematic gangsters. Birdie's power is rooted in psychological pressure rather than physical domination. He studies people the way a coach studies opposing teams, targeting weaknesses and tailoring his approach to whatever will guarantee control. His recruitment of Kyle, the film's protagonist, demonstrates this method. Instead of threatening him, Birdie positions himself as someone who understands Kyle's upbringing and emotional loneliness. By drawing parallels between their childhoods, he frames himself as supportive, even protective, which makes the manipulation harder to recognize. The dialogue in this scene is carefully structured to reveal Birdie's internal logic. Connection is merely a tool to pull someone deeper into his orbit. That predatory empathy separates him from Bishop, Tupac's earlier villain. Birdie never loses control in bursts of rage, but instead maintains a chilling steadiness rooted in a deeply ingrained inferiority complex. The film ties Birdie's behavior directly to the real-life instability surrounding Tupac during production. Filmed in Harlem in late 1993, his scenes were shot in the same period he was charged in the 1993 sexual assault case, and just days after the Atlanta shootout involving two off-duty police officers. This overlap between art and reality bleeds into Birdie's tense, paranoid body language. The character moves as if every conversation is already a trap and every alliance will end in betrayal. That tension heightens the menace in his final scenes, particularly during the rooftop confrontation where Birdie pushes Kyle's friend Boogaloo to the brink of violence simply to test his loyalty. A revealing production story further illustrates Birdie's psychological dominance. During a simple driving shot, Tupac intentionally halted filming twice over a minor prop issue, then retreated to his trailer for hours until the crew corrected it. Co-star Wood Harris described this as his first lesson in the power of the actor, showing how Tupac, much like Birdie, could seize control of an environment with total confidence. Snoop functions as the purest expression of Marlo Stanfield's enforcement philosophy: eliminate problems quickly, leave no trace, and treat violence as routine labor rather than emotional release. Her introduction in The Wire shows this mindset with precision. During the iconic nail gun scene, she purchases a Hilti nail gun and a box of fasteners with the same casual tone someone might use while buying household supplies. The acting choice is deliberate. The mundane delivery emphasizes that sealing bodies inside vacant buildings is, to her, standard procedure. This moment establishes her as an operator who has completely removed emotion from the act of killing, allowing her to carry out some of the series' most disturbing murders with unwavering calm. Her working partnership with Chris Partlow illustrates her structural function in the organization. Chris handles strategy and emotional navigation. Snoop tracks details, executes orders, and maintains efficiency. Together they create Marlo's silent empire, where threats disappear rather than escalate. Snoop's precision is evident in the methodical way she scouts locations, selects abandoned properties, implements body disposal, and maintains consistency across each operation. Her demeanor never shifts. Whether receiving orders, disposing of evidence, or threatening witnesses, her tone remains steady and unemotional, reflecting a personality shaped by survival rather than ambition. The boundary between character and actor deepens her impact. Felicia Pearson was not a trained performer. She was discovered by Michael K. Williams in a Baltimore nightclub, who recognized the intensity in her presence and encouraged producers to meet her. Her casting brought an unprecedented level of authenticity because her fictional role closely mirrored aspects of her real life. Pearson grew up in Baltimore, was born to a mother struggling with addiction, and at age 14 was convicted of second-degree murder, serving 6.5 years before re-entering civilian life. That history informs every gesture in her performance. Her body language suggests someone who learned early that vulnerability is dangerous. A lesser-known production detail highlights how close Snoop came to being written out entirely. On the morning she was scheduled for her first day of filming, she was arrested in New York when police found a pocket knife during a traffic stop. Instead of recasting the role, co-creator Ed Burns insisted she be given another chance. From that point forward, she arrived early to every call and delivered one of television's most unsettling portrayals of a street enforcer, Sully. Sully's arc across Top Boy is structured as a long, psychological descent, shaped by loss, instability, and the slow erosion of empathy. From the earliest episodes, he is presented as a volatile but deeply capable soldier, someone whose instincts were sharpened by a childhood defined by scarcity, chaos, and the absence of reliable adults. His early partnership with Duchesne shows this dynamic clearly. Duchesne plans, Sully executes. He handles pressure directly, anticipates danger with speed, and reacts without hesitation. These traits make him indispensable, but they also reveal how fear and wounded pride operate beneath his controlled exterior. As the seasons progress, Sully's trauma becomes the defining force behind his decisions. The death of Jason, the young boy he had taken under his wing, permanently shifts his internal structure. Sully transforms from a man who could still recognize innocence into someone who believes emotional attachment is a liability. This shift is visible in his body language. He becomes quieter, more withdrawn, and more suspicious of every gesture around him. His violence grows more focused. Instead of emotional outbursts, he delivers targeted eliminations rooted in the logic of survival. The killing of Driss exemplifies this change. Sully does not carry out the execution with anger or satisfaction. He approaches it as a necessary correction to protect the integrity of the operation. Kano's portrayal grounds this transformation in small behavioral details. His stillness, muttered responses, and heavy silences communicate more than explosive scenes ever could. This precision comes from Kano's insistence on authenticity throughout the production. In later seasons, he actively challenged scripts that felt unnatural, pushing rewrites to ensure the dialogue matched the reality of London street culture. His dedication is most visible in scenes where Sully processes grief. Kano lets the character fold inward, creating a sense that Sully understands he is becoming the very monster he once feared. The tense on-set dynamic between Kano and co-star Ashley Walters mirrored the friction between their characters. Walters later confirmed that their working relationship was strained for years, and that the tension was real enough to bleed directly into their performances. As a result, Sully's guarded demeanor and simmering resentment gain an extra layer of authenticity, reinforcing his transformation into the series' most psychologically complex and tragically inevitable figure, Deebo. Deebo's presence in Friday operates as the embodiment of localized power. He is not a kingpin, strategist, or organizer, but a street-level tyrant who dominates through physical intimidation and psychological pressure. His introduction on the bicycle immediately sets the tone. Residents react with fear before he even speaks, signaling that his authority comes from reputation and repeated demonstrations of force. The film uses Deebo to illustrate how a single individual can control an entire block simply by exploiting the community's reluctance to unite against him. He steals bikes, snatches, chains, and extorts neighbors not for profit but for dominance, reinforcing that fear is the currency he values most. One of the clearest examples of this dynamic is the scene where Deebo knocks out Red and steals his chain. The moment is brief but instructive. It shows how Deebo enforces control through targeted humiliation rather than strategic violence. He chooses victims who cannot or will not fight back, creating a feedback loop where the community internalizes submission. This intimidation structure explains why Craig's decision to fight back functions as the film's emotional climax. When Craig arms himself with a brick and engages Deebo in a fistfight, the narrative reframes the conflict. It becomes a confrontation between communal fear and individual courage. Behind the character, Lister's portrayal draws on real-world influence. He openly stated that Deebo was based on Eugene Big U Henley, a co-founder of the Rolling 60s Crips and a major figure in Los Angeles gang culture. Lister, who grew up in Compton, studied Big U's demeanor, physicality, and presence, adapting them into a toned-down but recognizable screen version. This grounding in reality explains why Deebo's movements feel authentic. His intimidating stare, slow gait, and calculated posture mirror the controlled aggression of high-ranking street figures. Lister often joked about hating the infamous underwear scene, yet he embraced the character's impact throughout his career. At fan events, he would sometimes ride a bicycle around the venue in full Deebo mode, demonstrating how seamlessly he could slip back into the persona. This continued embodiment shows how convincingly the character captured the essence of a neighborhood enforcer, a man whose power depends on visibility, unpredictability, and the constant reminder that he is always watching. Ordell Robbie. Ordell Robbie is constructed as a study in rational, calculated villainy. He is not driven by rage, impulse, or theatrical brutality, but by a cold understanding of cost, risk, and self-preservation. From his first scenes, the film establishes him as a gun runner who values control over chaos. He keeps his operations small, compartmentalized, and quiet, relying on charm and conversation to maintain influence. His long, persuasive monologues serve a functional purpose. Ordell talks to evaluate people, measure intentions, and detect weaknesses. When he decides someone is a liability, the transition from casual friendliness to lethal action is immediate and emotionless. This approach is clear in his handling of Beaumont Livingston, played by Chris Tucker. Instead of reacting with anger when Beaumont is arrested, Ordell analyzes the situation through pure logic. Beaumont will almost certainly take a plea deal. Therefore, Beaumont must be eliminated. The entire sequence, from the car ride to the trunk execution, is staged to reveal Ordell's internal math. He is calm, complimentary, and even humorous, as if carrying out a routine business adjustment. The smoothness of the interaction reinforces his worldview. Survival depends on removing variables before they multiply. His dynamic with Robert De Niro's Louis Gara illustrates the same pattern. Louis's sloppy behavior, particularly the impulsive killing of Melanie in the mall parking lot, forces Ordell to reevaluate him as an operational threat. When Ordell confronts Louis, the decision is again governed by logic. Louis is unpredictable and therefore unusable. Ordell executes him without hesitation, mirroring the emotionless pragmatism he applied to Beaumont. Samuel L. Jackson's preparation amplifies this precision. Working closely with Quentin Tarantino, he crafted Ordell's distinct look, braided hair, tinted glasses, and casual beachwear, to project a laid-back persona that masks the character's lethal efficiency. Jackson also leaned heavily into the character's verbal rhythm, using Elmore Leonard's dialogue structure to make Ordell seem simultaneously approachable and dangerous. One controversial fact is that Ordell is responsible for the majority of the film's repeated racial slurs. Tarantino defended the choice by arguing it would be dishonest to write a criminal from that environment speaking in sanitized language. Jackson approached this linguistic realism as part of Ordell's psychological texture, a man who uses words as another form of weaponry, aligning perfectly with his calculated approach to survival. Lil Zé. Lil Dice's transformation into Lil Zé is one of the most methodically constructed descents into violence in modern crime cinema. His trajectory begins in childhood. The film shows him as a young boy tagging along with older thieves, observing their methods and internalizing a worldview in which violence is the most reliable tool for control. The turning point is the motel robbery, where the older kids believe they are carrying out a standard stick-up, while Lil Dice follows a different script entirely. After signaling the start of the robbery, he circles the building and murders every occupant, revealing that even at that age he sees dominance, not theft, as the true objective. This event reshapes the entire community. What the older boys view as a routine crime becomes a massacre that shifts the balance of fear and power in the favela. By the time Lil Dice grows into Lil Zé, his identity is completely anchored in terror. He expands his rule by eliminating rivals, controlling corner operations, and enforcing obedience through unpredictable brutality. The film uses pacing and editing to communicate his instability. Rapid cuts, sudden gunfire, and frantic camera movement mirror his internal chaos. The restaurant shooting sequence exemplifies his approach. A trivial slight triggers immediate execution, showing that any perceived disrespect is treated as an existential threat. His power is not built on strategy but on cultivating a reputation so terrifying that resistance feels suicidal. The casting amplifies this realism. Leandro Firmino was not a trained actor. He was a resident of one of Rio's favelas, discovered during a massive street casting initiative. His performance carries the physical authenticity of someone who understands the environment instinctively. His movements, dialect, and body language reflect the lived reality of the setting. This authenticity extends to the film's child actors, whose performances were so convincing that they raised ethical questions. Reports from the set describe directors using intense psychological methods to elicit genuine fear in certain scenes, including having a young actor imagine his mother drowning during the moment where a child is shot in the foot. This practice, while controversial, contributed to the raw emotional impact of Lil Zé's terror. Zé's death in the final act reinforces the film's thesis. His fall does not end violence. It merely clears space for a younger, more feral generation to take over. The closing scenes, children casually discussing whom they will kill next, confirm that Lil Zé was not an anomaly, but a product of a cycle destined to repeat. Marlo Stanfield. Marlo Stanfield functions as the final evolutionary stage of The Wire's criminal ecosystem, a figure defined not by profit, territory, or legacy, but by an uncompromising demand for absolute respect. His introduction immediately distinguishes him from the Barksdale organization. While Avon and Stringer operate with recognizable motives, reputation for Avon, corporate expansion for Stringer, Marlo operates with a stripped-down philosophy. The mere act of being challenged is an intolerable offense. His early confrontation with Bodie exemplifies this mindset. When Bodie questions Marlo's authority over a corner, Marlo's boredom and minimal dialogue signal a man who views violence as neither personal nor emotional. It is the necessary language for maintaining order. Marlo's empire grows through an architecture of silence. Instead of open warfare, he uses Chris Partlow and Snoop Pearson to disappear rivals quietly, filling abandoned row houses with bodies sealed behind nailed-shut doors. This system eliminates the usual indicators of gang conflict: morgues, witnesses, retaliation, allowing Marlo to expand without triggering police attention. His power rests on invisibility. The fewer bodies that surface, the more control he retains. His ability to avoid spectacle demonstrates why he is uniquely suited to the new Baltimore. Subtlety is more effective than territorial bravado. Jamie Hector's performance reinforces this structure through near-static composure. His stillness is not emptiness, it is suppression. Hector trained at the Lee Strasberg Theater and Film Institute, and he channels that discipline into micro-expressions. Slight eye movements, controlled breathing, and measured posture. These choices make Marlo's rare outbursts even more shocking. The courthouse scene, where he erupts with, "My name is my name," lands with such force precisely because he is usually expressionless. The explosion reveals the single belief that anchors him. Identity is the only asset he considers non-negotiable. Hector originally auditioned for the role of Cuddy, the reformed boxer, while Gbenga Akinagbe, who ultimately played the violent enforcer Chris Partlow, auditioned for Marlo. The producers reshuffled the roles after seeing Hector's unnerving calm. His chilling stillness, more than aggression or flamboyance, embodied the specific kind of menace the writers envisioned for Baltimore's new kingpin. Marlo's final scene reinforces the tragedy of his philosophy. After surviving police investigations, political shifts, and rival crews, he briefly experiences legitimacy through a real estate partnership. Yet when someone bumps into him on the street, his instincts override his new life. He reacts with the same cold fury as before. The moment reveals the truth. Marlo is built for the corners, and the corners are the only place where his values make sense. Screwface. Screwface is constructed as a hybrid figure, part criminal strategist, part mythic terror, and part projection of American anxieties about Jamaican immigrant communities in the late 1980s and early 1990s. His introduction immediately separates him from standard action film antagonists. Instead of being presented as a simple drug boss, he is framed through ritual, mystique, and whispers of supernatural power. The film uses obeya symbolism, rhythmic chants, and coded gestures to create the impression that his authority extends beyond physical violence. This layering of cultural imagery is intentional. By blending criminal enterprise with spiritual fear, the narrative positions Screwface as someone whose influence reaches into the psychological realm, not just the streets. Operationally, Screwface's control depends on absolute loyalty enforced through spectacle. When he beheads a rival's associate and throws the severed head into a nightclub, the act is designed as both punishment and advertisement. Resistance will be met with theatrical brutality. His crew moves with coordinated precision, invading suburban communities with the confidence of soldiers who believe their leader is untouchable. These scenes reflect one of the film's underlying themes, the fear that organized foreign crime is infiltrating quiet American neighborhoods. Screwface becomes the embodiment of that fear, a figure whose menace is as much symbolic as literal. The film's major twist, that Screwface is actually one of two identical twin brothers, reinforces this mythology. Throughout the narrative, his ability to appear in multiple places fuels rumors that he cannot be killed, that he is protected by dark magic, and that he sees everything. When the truth is revealed, the twist recontextualizes earlier scenes. What looked like supernatural omnipresence was actually a coordinated performance built on deception and timing. Basil Wallace's performance grounds the character despite the heightened presentation. A Jamaican-American actor with extensive stage experience, Wallace used vocal cadence, measured posture, and stillness to project controlled dominance rather than chaotic rage. The film was originally titled Yellow Man, and producers hoped to cast the real-life dancehall icon King Yellowman as the villain. Their motive was simple. Yellowman's striking appearance and rebellious persona already carried symbolic weight in American pop culture. When the studio ultimately chose Wallace, the character shifted from a visually driven concept to a performance-driven one, allowing Screwface to become a more nuanced and memorable antagonist. If you enjoyed this deep dive video about iconic gangsters, you're going to love the one on your screen, so go check it out now.